Good morning, everybody, or afternoon for Kenneth. Depending on where you are in the world, we'll know what time of day it is on whether you're holding a cup of coffee or not. I'm really excited to be here with all of you to talk about funding forest impact. My name is Sierra Hartman. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Rainforest Partnership. And this is a really exciting conversation to be having with everybody here on World Rainforest Day. In the past year alone, over $15 billion have been pledged toward forest protection and restoration. Historically, not a lot of this makes it into the hands of the people at the front lines of that mission. And so the good news is that landscape is in the process of changing a lot. And getting that capital into the hands of the right people is shifting. And so today we're going to get to hear from 3 different experts, potentially 4, if he makes it on. And we're going to hear from some people at the forefront of making that change come to life. And there's Keegan. Welcome, Keegan.
Apologies, it was a very 2022 video moment, but
all
I'm
right.
here.
We're all used to it here. So our 4 experts, that was perfect timing, who are at the forefront of changing that landscape of funding forest impact. So we have Dan Coleman from the Giving Block. We have Anne Alexandra, is that correct? Okay. From Prince Bernard Nature Fund, we have Kenneth Green from Make My Moneymata, and Keegan, I'm going to try not to say this wrong, Eisenstadt?
Perfect.
Yes, from South Pole. So before we start our conversation, I would love if each of you can just go around and introduce yourselves to our crew here and explain a little bit more about your work in this space. So I'll pass it off to Dan first, and if we can just kind of go around our virtual room here.
Thank you, Sierra. It's a pleasure to be with everyone here for World Rainforest Day and talking about funding in the critical area space of need here. I'm Dan Coleman. I'm a crypto fundraising strategist. You're probably like, whoa, hold the phone. What is that? That means I work with nonprofits the world over on how to raise cryptocurrency to fuel their missions with the Giving Block. The Giving Block is the world's leading solution for crypto philanthropy, which enables these crypto donations to come from these crypto holders, or hodlers, as we say in the crypto space, to give it away to these nonprofits like you who might be out there working in the rainforest. In my role here, I partner closely with these nonprofits. I work very closely on strategies and high-end needs and one-to-one stuff, but we provide everything from just accepting crypto to your customized solutions. And then I was just going to say, we're very connected in the rainforest space and critical ecosystems. We're helping organizations raise these crypto gifts, from small-sized organizations to all the big names, working with clients like Rainforest Partnership and beyond. I came to TGB with 10 years of fundraising experience and everything from major to plan giving and leading large fundraising teams, mainly in the performing arts space. So I've definitely lived in the trenches and know what you're going through trying to raise money to do what you're trying to do, and love this work. So lastly, I was just going to say I'm thrilled to be a part of this and excited to be a part of this discussion today.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Let's pass it to Kenneth, who's next on my screen.
Hey everyone, and just to echo Dan, great to be here. Really powerful conversations I'm sure we're going to have today, and yeah, great to be here. So basically, organisation called Make My Moneymata. We're relatively new. We've only been around for, I'd say, kind of 2-3 years. We're set up by film director Richard Curtis, who directed Love Actually, Four Weddings and a Funeral, Blackadder, quite a few other kind of things alongside that, to really help people understand that their finances are making a difference to the world, and actually a lot of the time their finances are invested in a way that is against their values. So right now, a lot of people are stopping flying. They're kind of reducing their plastic waste, getting electric cars. Absolutely fantastic ways to try and tackle the climate emergency. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize their pensions and their bank accounts are actually investing in these kind of products. So basically, we have vegetarians who are invested in factory farms. We have cancer survivors who are investing in tobacco, and environmentalists invest in drilling for oil. So really, we're here to try and let people know that, understand that, and also what they can do when they discover this problem. So I don't know about people kind of in the audience or in the panel, but certainly before I started kind of really looking into my finances, I had absolutely no idea my pension specifically was invested in things like deforestation and other ones. So again, climate campaigning, 10 years, did not know my pension was literally undoing all the kind of good things that I'd been doing with my career. So that was a properly kind of big kind of, I don't know about you guys, but explosion for me to realize that. But it's also great to be able to kind of actually help kind of tackle that issue. So in the UK alone, there's about £2.7 trillion invested in UK pensions and $48 trillion worldwide. So that's a huge, substantial amount of money. And just imagine if that money was actually invested in things that make the world a better place, rather than right now being invested in fossil fuels and deforestation and other elements like that. So what we do, first of all, is to raise awareness of this issue. So we've been doing some research, and we discovered that having a green pension is 21 times more effective at cutting your carbon than going veggie, stopping flying, and changing energy provider combined. So it just shows you, imagine if all that money kind of is actually kind of harnessed for good. So doing an absolutely fantastic world of good, basically. So in the last kind of year and a half, we've managed to get around £1 trillion of UK pension money committed to net zero pensions, so robust net zero, so halving emissions by 2030, as well as kind of other elements that are aligned to the Paris Agreement. But we're also really conscious that actually a lot of people, if you talk to them in the street, might not understand what net zero is. So we're really keen to actually delve down a bit deeper into more of the kind of issues that people care about and talk about. And when we polled the UK public, we actually discovered that people would be more disappointed to learn their pension was invested in deforestation compared to fossil fuels, labour rights, nuclear, a whole bunch of other things. So that really gave us the kind of power to go on and talk about deforestation and really try and work out how to tackle that. So we've been working with two organisations, one called Global Canopy, one called Systemic, to help understand the impact our pensions have on deforestation. So right now we've found out about £300 billion £300 billion of UK pension money is linked to deforestation. We don't know what that is globally, but if it's that percentage, that's a huge amount of money. We're talking about trillions of kind of international finance invest in the things that actually cause deforestation. So we've been working with UK pension funds to try and help them go deforestation free. And we also create a lot of fun videos. So obviously Richard Curtis is a comedian, he's a writer. We try to make pensions a bit fun, which sounds absolutely cheesy, completely understand that. But if you make things fun and interesting, people actually care about the topics. So we definitely recommend having we look at some of our videos, especially if you're bored or feeling down about the world. They're actually pretty good at cheering you up. But yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kenneth. I don't think this is an issue that, obviously, like you've experienced, many people are familiar with. I found this fascinating to learn about, but we'll get more into it later. I'll pass it off to Anne.
Thank you. Fascinating indeed. It's already super interesting to learn about all these things. But I come from a totally different angle. My name is Anne Alexander. I'm managing the Prince Bernhard Nature Fund. And I'm also managing the Conservation Connect platform. That is our latest project. And that is what I want to present to you. But first, a little bit about the Prince Bernhard Nature Fund. We just are, let's say, a very traditional fund. We give small grants to local conservation organizations worldwide, in the form of small grants. Basically these people on the forefront of our fighting for our biodiversity. I'm a biologist myself. I very sympathize with these people in the field. They're really fighting for a rainforest, for every type of critical ecosystem out there. But in that time, I'm doing this for 6 years now, and in these 6 years, there were a few things that really stood out to me. You know, the people, the individuals that are leading these organizations, they're so resilient, they're so passionate, and because of this passion, they can move mountains with only a small amount of cash. So that's amazing. But they also have to deal with a lot of challenges. They are also operating often very isolated. They are very reliant, very dependent on annual grants like ours. And they have to deal with that on top of that, with a very inefficient and I would say messy grant-making sector. I would say the sector that the Prince Bernhard Nature Fund, or PBNF in short, is part of, we are very inefficient because there's no shared database. We do a lot of double work. We don't share really data. There's very little references or recommendations we send. So nobody has any clue, especially of the smaller local organizations, who does what, where, and who is funded by who. And by being so inefficient as a sector, I mean, we can look at our own organization and try to be efficient, but as a sector, we're just doing a bad job. And by being so inefficient as a sector, we also limit the efficiency of these organizations and the impact they can potentially make. So this is why we started Conservation Connect with a group of funding agencies, basically a group of funders, to first make a tool that finally makes the sharing of data easy. And we created basically a shared database of all the projects we supported. And for funders, this creates a very nice overview of who does what, where, funded by who. And it also gives us finally some insights into where our grants went over the past years, for our own organization, but also sector-wide. Where does the most money go? Which species are best funded? Which countries are best funded? Where are the trends and gaps? So we can also, let's say, adjust our strategies on that. But for organizations, this is also an opportunity, but they get, by being on this platform, they get more visibility and credibility. They get the vouchers of these organizations that supported them, and they get access to a huge network. And on top of that, we want to mobilize funding also through this platform to these organizations. So that in short is Conservation Connect. To be honest, it is a baby because we started only last December. We launched our MVP, so we're six months on our way. But it's been a very exciting period. We now have 7 new partners, or we do this with 7 funders at the moment. Next to PBNF, we have Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund, IUCNNL, the Marine Conservation Action Fund, just to name a few. But we're 7 at this moment. So it's also, that's what we're doing now. It's an exciting period. And it's maybe also a little shout out to, if there's any other funder watching at this moment, to feel free to drop me a message, because we're really looking to grow it with funders at this moment, so we can give better opportunities and access to funding for these organizations that we try to help. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anne. Keegan, let's pass it off to you to introduce yourself.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. First, could I get a thumbs up if you hear me clearly, or if there's some sort of, okay, lovely. I am super excited to be at World Rainforest Day. Like Dan, Kenneth, and Anne, I share a passion for the woods. I'm actually a tropical forester by academic training, which I know on a panel of biologists, crypto fundraisers, and pension warriors, this sounds perhaps trite at the moment, but I am super excited to be here. I've spent some formative years out in the woods. And I now am the Nature-Based Solutions Project Originating Director for global projects at South Pole. South Pole is a carbon asset development company, and we work on mitigating climate change. So our take on this panel is awesome. From the cryptocurrency donations, and there's also a lot of crypto activity currently in climate mitigation, to influencing the large beastly banks and where they spend their monies, or our monies, as through our pension activities, and also trying to harmonize and create efficient systems for financing through nonprofits and or foundations. The South Pole take on trying to channel and leverage finance into rainforests globally is really through what it's weird to say, but it sounds like I'm the most traditional actor on the panel. I work in an already existing marketplace, and we sell an already existing product. We create and broker carbon credits. So the carbon offsets that everybody hears is essentially a metric ton of CO2 equivalent that is captured by nature in biomass on a particular plot of ground on planet Earth that wouldn't be there if we weren't actively engaged in improving the ways we manage forests, in avoiding the cutting and felling of forests, in improving forest management, or planting and establishing trees in places where they weren't. And they wouldn't have come back of their own accord under natural succession. So we quantify these carbon credits. We then sell them to corporate clients that are part of their net zero pathway, which it's like a net zero pension is going to have to find a way to encounter an approach to reduce the emissions associated with those investments. South Pole is one of many companies on on our little small third rock from the sun that's able to create these carbon assets in a certified manner in a voluntary carbon market, and in some cases some countries have compliance carbon markets as well, like the EU ETS in Europe. We work in all kinds of markets. We create these environmental services. They're certified, third party audited to known standards, and then they're brokered like most commodities, like corn or soybeans. But the money that comes out of it is leveraged back to the project and the piece of ground on planet Earth where the trees were saved or planted, or in some cases not cut, or extending the rotation length at which that tree lives on site. So it's all about measuring the forests or biology and the capacity of natural systems which have evolved on this planet over billions of years, to use photosynthesis to store energy and carbon in the trees or in the soil instead of in the atmosphere. So that we hear a lot about tech companies trying to promote technological solutions to climate change with machinery or carbon scrubbers, and all of that is awesome. But we're not going to get to the gigatons of CO2 sequestered that we need to have a stable planet that's good for humans, without applying all the tools that are at our disposal. And frankly, the largest tool is nature. So we're trying to use nature to help bring about a solution to a problem that all of us, that my parents and grandparents have caused without knowing it. But now we know about it. So if I pass the same problem on to my children, I'm culpable at this point. So um, nature-based solutions to mitigate climate change is also important for adaptation. It's also important for global equity. It's also an important transfer of capital from the global north to the global south. And in many of the nature-based solutions activities that I'm engaged in globally, we're working specifically on the promotion of co-benefits that Anna has talked about, which are related to biodiversity habitats, habitat connectivity, landscape habitat planning, and these are all pieces of the puzzle that we put together, not just with a carbon credit, but also clean water, soil restoration, and or in some cases improvement, flood control mitigation. There's a number of ecosystem services that play a role. So again, I'm sort of the fuddy-duddy here because I sell a product that already exists in a marketplace that's normal. But I'm looking forward to figuring out how we can scale up our visions together to drive funding towards towards rainforest protection, and even in some cases the replanting of said rainforest so that we can get there with native species. I
Awesome.
appreciate being here, and I look forward to this discussion. It's going to be awesome.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Keegan, and thank you everyone for the introductions. I think it's great to see that we have, Dan, Kenneth, and Anne are all here from very new, emerging spaces, and it's also great to have the voice of Keegan and South Pole. And it's just a nice balance of what's been around and what's emerging as we speak. So on that note, I mean, I think a few of you mentioned scaling actually in your introduction. So I'm curious, in terms of scaling up, especially these newer solutions for getting money in the right hands, what are some of the visions and the mechanisms for scaling up these solutions in a really big way?
I'll take a stab if nobody wants to. Anybody else?
I was going to
Um,
say, go ahead. I'll jump in after you.
absolutely. Clearly in the carbon market space, we're in an inflection point, right? The How would I describe it? I sort of feel like it's the Greta Thunberg effect, right? The planet, the youth, the society is starting to influence policymakers, and in some weird way, we're starting to influence global finance. So the scaling of carbon market activities in general and the voluntary carbon market in particularly um, is influenced by all kinds of macroeconomic trends, right? Recession, inflation, dot-com booms. But the voluntary carbon market in this past year has essentially exploded with
Mhm.
price signals from what is a carbon credit worth. 18 months ago, it was worth $3 US, and had been worth between $1 to $3 US for the 20 years before that. I sold my first carbon credit in 1999. So I've seen this market sort of stagnate for years and years and years.
Mhm.
And then the price signal from a combination of the Paris Climate Accord and the global UN Framework Convention on Climate Change signing the Paris Accord, which stipulated that basically we had this financial experiment called the voluntary carbon market that ran for 20 years, and now the global governments all agreed through a consensus mechanism that, yeah, that experiment, let's try using it. So they Article 6 of that accord says that the voluntary carbon market is a model that they're going to try and use as part of the global solutions. The price signal that sent now, instead of $3 US, we're
Mhm.
selling it more like 12 to 17 to 20, depending on the type. And what that did was everybody said, oh, let's make projects. And so everybody went around the world making more projects, which is
Mhm.
great, except we didn't increase the human capital to be able to process all of this interest, right? So the verifiers and the validators are having trouble. They need to staff up. We've got third-party auditors, carbon certification standards. They're unable to staff up. You've got people like South Pole running around the world trying to hire people.
Mhm.
We're all competing for the same people to hire. There's just not enough people to do all the work, because the price signal that got sent meant that Amazon and Microsoft and Google are all trying to buy all these credits and create all these credits. So the demand signal is crazy, and the interest of JP Morgan and Bank of America and all of these large investment funds are now
Mhm.
looking to give us money to do projects on the ground. For
Yeah.
20 years, I had no money. I had dreams of projects and trying to create credits. Now I have more money than I can responsibly mobilize, but it's under, internal rate of return financial metrics, because the price signal for carbon is enough. So part of the scale up is just, can we get enough people to process all the interest right now? We really can't.
Mhm.
It's impossible. The universities aren't training these people in this market. So that's a big thing. I think another really important thing for us is to try to find technologies that we can apply that conserve rainforests, that protect them, that help reestablish and restore degraded sections of them, and that make them more
Mhm.
resilient to the inevitable climate or sort of weather
Yeah.
fluctuations that are coming their way, whether it's rainforests or floods or massive hurricanes, etc. So those activities we're piloting in a bunch of countries, but what we really need is to explode them. Once we've got a proof of
Yeah.
concept, we need governments to buy in and begin to implement those with private capital. And I think we're close to getting all those parts put together. So that's pretty
Well,
exciting.
that's actually a really interesting thing you bring up. And if it's okay with you, Dan, I know you were going to go next, but I kind of want to pivot to a different question, because that really gets at the heart of the challenge here. So how do we get money or resources of any kind, but this is specifically about funding, into the hands of the people that are actually on the ground doing these projects? I'm curious, you all work as, I don't want to use the term middleman, but kind of like an intermediary between the funders and the people that are actually doing the work on the ground. Um, what are some of the most effective pathways for helping, these funders who really want to get their hands in a high impact on the ground project into those hands? Is anyone? Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can react to that, because indeed I
Yeah.
think we are indeed all kind of middlemen in here, or fulfilling some kind of middleman function, and Conservation Connect is indeed trying to do that as well on a very how you say, down to earth level, because we just see indeed the mismatch between, on the one side there is a lot of money. We know there's a lot of bigger funds that have a lot of funds, but there's whole sectors with money available to what Keegan also was saying. Like there is money available to implement, and then on the other hand, we get all those, let's say, smaller projects coming to us with a money question, like, and we see those on the ground. The problem is that those usually they operate under the radar. They're very invisible. Of course, you got the bingos, the big international NGOs that are very visible, but then you have like thousands, hundreds, thousands of smaller NGOs that are doing amazing work with basically no overhead. That's the people that should also have access to this market, but that usually, because they operate so much under the radar, they don't they don't have access to this money. So this is one of the reasons why we try to we look at ourselves as funding agencies, as middlemen, because we believe that there's a key function for us here. There's a key role that we need to do, because we are in the middle. We see the funding on the one hand, and we also see the projects. And in the case of PBNF, we also have a very cool niche in which we operate, because we basically support startups. So we get to almost vet and test out these organizations that never received money from anyone before. And we get to give them the first grant. Say, okay, here you go. You get $20,000, make your proof of concept. And some of them, they really they shine. They get a follow-up grant. And then you want to connect them from the seed funders to the, let's say, seedling funders, to the follow-up funders, to the bigger money, because these projects, there are so many projects that have huge potential, but they just need help to grow into to being an organization that can handle larger sums of money and get to that long-term support. So there's definitely, I mean, this is one way of approaching it. For us, this is very logical, because we are in that realm where organizations constantly reach out to us. So this is one way of trying to connect that. So now we have this whole huge database of projects, and then we try to get, on the other hand, the funding and try to match that, or try to disperse that in an efficient way. So yeah, that's our side of the story. But I feel like there's so many strategies you can let go on this in this field. But this is a very down to earth perspective, I would say.
That is so cool. And I'm going to jump in and say, I think this is where it gets really interesting in the crypto space, and that we're seeing nonprofits the world over literally connect direct to folks who aren't even in their region, have no clue who they are, but are inspired by the mission of the organization and the impact they can have in the rainforest, for example. And I think what's so cool about the blockchain is that, first of all, everything's transparent and public. You can never hide on the blockchain. We might not know who your name is attached to a wallet address, but we're forever going to see when that gift left Anne's hand and went to Sierra's hands. And that's what's so cool about it. And it's always searchable. And I think what's so cool in addition to that is that we're seeing organizations get out there, build a presence online, connect the dots, and see tremendous growth in fundraising from folks who are younger, more diverse, less, tied to certain areas of the world, but more tied to the impact and the ROI that organizations are having on the front lines. And I think this is a great solution, or a great area to get engaged in if you're on the front lines and you have a small team, but you have enough bandwidth to be more active in the crypto space, because people are looking for solutions. They don't want to wait around, 3 more generations to solve climate crisis and to solve the issues in the rainforest. They want solutions sooner rather than later. And they want to help people who are out there engaging in the work, on the front lines, and showing the impact that they're having, and being very responsible with those funds. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, and I'd encourage folks who are on the edge of this to take a little bit of a look into crypto as a potential solution for your fundraising.
Can I add something? I'm just thinking, because then I was just saying we're all middlemen here, or we are in the middle of something. But I think maybe with crypto, this is one way to actually do it without the middleman almost, right? So the givers can give directly to a certain cause or a certain milestone, a certain thing they want to have done. So you can be very specific in your gift, and you don't need to do it without any middleman. Is that I see that also as a possible strength of the crypto, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. And yet to add to that, I would say the best part of working with a provider like the Giving Block is we're similar to Stripe in that we're going to help you accept that crypto, process it into cash so you can get to work on your mission and not get lost in all the semantics of what's a wallet, how does a blockchain work, how does my nonprofit accept or don't accept crypto. We understand you don't have time for all that. You need to be focused on fundraising. So we have the expertise in-house that, is learning and staying up to date on all the things in crypto, providing you the great solution you need. But yeah, I think that's the cool thing is you can kind of, use crypto as a new future for your organization.
You guys both bring up a really interesting point there. So I've heard it mentioned a few times, is this question of impact. And so how do we get money into the hands of the most impactful organizations? And like Anne mentioned, and Dan has mentioned, as in terms of helping people get money into people's hands, how do we ensure that these are the organizations that are actually having a powerful impact on the ground in the forest? So that sometimes the largest organizations, and this is not always the case, but sometimes they are not the ones, or the most well-known organizations, I should say, are not the ones having the largest impact. Whereas we have sometimes very small organizations that need support getting the money actually in the bank. Like with crypto, I think it's fantastic that you guys offer that service for those of us who don't speak, who have crypto for dummies on our coffee table, but we we need that expertise because we have limited resources, because all of our resources are going towards the work on the ground. How do you all, and I'm curious, Kenneth, about this for you as well, because I imagine you spend a lot of time vetting, if we're not giving to deforestation, who are we going to give to, and how do we recommend where people give their money? How do you all measure impact, and how do you decide what organizations to recommend and to elevate?
Yeah, and maybe just to quickly kind of jump in from the kind of pension fund perspective. So I think this is a problem actually a lot of pension funds and a lot of other funders are having, is that they're putting more money, more ESG money into these kind of areas, but actually struggling to identify projects or that kind of like robust kind of theory of change those organizations might have to actually work out if they're doing kind of good in the ground. And I think that whenever you see more active investment happen, the cost of that investment increases just because of the amount of work you've got to do to kind of like do your due diligence analysis of it. And I think this is actually one of the bigger blockers to more money getting routed through in terms of these kind of projects. Just because certainly the people I work with, the kind of more traditional funders like pension funds and others, deforestation is so new to them. They've literally kind of like, apologies to any pension fund if they are listening, but a lot of them are still learning what deforestation is, how it impacts people, and actually kind of how to think about it. And it's something that we recognize from our push with net zero, is that when you have pension trustees, the people who actually kind of make a lot of the decisions, who sign off on a lot of the big investments, if they're learning what a topic is, they feel way less comfortable actually putting their money there. Therefore, they'd rather go for the kind of old traditional investments like oil and gas and others are actually causing the problems. But one thing that we've always seen as being really impactful is kind of like market signals in terms of the government activity. So getting governments come out and say, actually, all pension funds should be deforestation free by 2025 or 2030. That then kind of almost creates the market reason for pension funds to kind of work together almost, or create those platforms or use platforms that already exist to try and push that money towards deforestation. But it'd be really good to hear kind of other folks in the panel's view on how you actually measure that impact to make sure money is actually doing what you want it to do.
Thanks, Kenneth. Does anyone else want to share on that? How you get the right organizations funded?
I was going to say, Anne, if you want to jump in, but I'll keep it brief. I think what's cool in the crypto space is that the donors are doing it themselves. They're doing their own due diligence. And, the age old take your friend to lunch, have a glass of wine, close the major gift is still successful for many nonprofits across the planet. But what I think is so interesting about crypto is that the donor typically never tells you who they are. 60% or more of gifts are fully anonymous, no relationship, no attachment to the organization directly. But what we find in the crypto space is that they're absolutely following your organization. They're looking at all of your social posts, they're reading your emails, they're engaging with you. They're just not telling you who they are because they value their anonymity and they want to just be who they are and care about you, but not necessarily connect with you on a deeper level. And so what's so neat about that is that they're always kind of like watching you like a hawk, if you will, and like paying attention to, oh, how'd they use my crypto gift? Are they doing the work they say they're doing? Are their posts aligning? Are their reports matching the work on the ground? And I think that's where, the more concise you are, the more direct you are, the more clear with connecting the dots between we received funding and we're doing X with it, and this is the impact you have with that, the better you're going to be as an organization. And it doesn't take, a huge amount of overhead to do this reporting. Just make it clean, efficient, and intuitive. And, spend a little bit of time, get your numbers together, and then tell the story in an impactful and a simple way is my recommendation. And I cut you off, so I'll kick this back to you.
Actually,
No,
Dan,
that's all right.
Dan, can I ask a really quick question? Can you give us a sense of scale? Like how much money are we talking about in crypto donations?
Yeah, so there's over a trillion in total asset class right now. Obviously, we're in a bear market, so it's down from the 3 trillion it was nearly at in December as a total crypto asset class. In terms of last year, we're definitely like over the 1 year mark of hitting about 9 figures in processing just at the giving block in crypto gifts. But we're one solution. There are many people that give direct or have their own wallets, and so we're seeing lots of money, hundreds of millions of dollars moving in crypto now.
Wow.
And I guess the logical next question is, Kenneth, I mean, I'm assuming pension funds blow that out of the water. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think globally, 48 trillion dollars in pensions. So that's how it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, but now you have to influence the investments in businesses as opposed to straight gifts. So it's a totally different model. Just curious, just thinking about scale. Thanks.
Yeah,
Sorry, Anne.
those are great questions. We'll pass it back to Anne. Thanks, Keegan.
No, don't worry. It is interesting. It's a lot of money. Can do a lot. So keep doing what you're doing. Yes, in our case, it's let's say I agree, or I can here join the line with what Dan said about the reporting. Like the organizations that we are typically supporting there, we don't have like strict KPIs. It's very difficult to actually have a standardized a standardized way measure of measuring impact in conservation organizations. The conservation scene has not agreed upon such a standard yet, so that would actually be a very good step towards securing more funding, I think, because this is one thing that is always a little bit tricky, is if you have a philanthropist or whatever, a business, how people always want to know what happens with my $1 or with my €1. And there's no really standardized packet of indicators there yet. But what we do get often is just very nice stories, and from that you feel the struggle, you feel the passion, so donors get emotionally connected to a project. And I think what is cool about approaching this from the funder's perspective, whether it is family funds or other type of private funds, we do get to, let's say, test out a lot. So you have this, every fund is in its own niche, let's say. So you have funders that are very specific on seed funding, like we are. So we give the initial funding, and then we get to test and we get to see what they achieve. And when we're impressed with that, we would like to push it through to get to the next level of funding, right? So there is kind of a funding chain from seed funding to follow-up funding to the big money that I really believe in that chain. Especially in equaling the playing field for the smaller organizations, so they also have access to that big money through that chain, but that chain is currently a little bit broken. So that is what we're trying to fix here, is to be able to recognize the impact of the smaller organizations, so that we can kind of give them the little step up to the others. And this is very qualitative, as I said, but their impact, I think, should not be underestimated on global scale.
Yeah, that's great insight. Thank you, Anne. I think it's really an interesting situation it creates, because the more measurement organizations tend to have available to them, that also tends to mean that they're already larger, they already have funding, they already have the resources to even create those measures to share with the world. And so those stories to tell are really an important part of the puzzle. And then having different avenues for elevating those smaller organizations and help them reach the funding they need and help the funders reach them is a really critical part of this whole dance. I'm really curious, I had a question written down specifically for Dan around crypto, but actually hearing Kenneth and Keegan talk about your solutions, I'm just going to open this question up to the whole group. But my question for Dan originally was, have you seen an uptick in youth involvement in giving? Because crypto tends to be like where the kids are playing these days. We have like 12-year-old millionaires on crypto. I don't know. Curious though, also with the pension funds and Keegan with your solution at South Pole, have you guys seen people on either end of the age spectrum getting more involved through these different avenues for giving?
I think, we've definitely, our organization's almost targeted young people, because pensions, most people only start thinking about them when they're kind of 40, 50, 60, etc. Mm-hmm. And because often it's going to be the most amount of money you actually kind of have in your possession for a lot of people, we're really keen to kind of target young people and actually make sure they were interested in what their money was doing. And I think our kind of average kind of supporter is like 31 or something like that. And it's really interesting actually, because when you talk to, I say, most of the kind of climate focused folks about their investments, and you make them realize actually they're probably right now going into kind of fossil fuels and other things, it really does kind of like have this like moment, this almost explosion in their brain. And I think that whenever we have those conversations, we instantly see people go and look at, right, how can I actually put my money in something better, whether that's kind of switching their pension fund, whether actually it's lobbying their pension fund and getting their entire pension fund to kind of go net zero or go green, and hopefully in the future go deforestation free. But I think it's such a kind of fertile space for everyone to be talking to young people and targeting, especially Greta Thunberg was mentioned earlier. That generation have actually grown up so much more knowledgeable about climate issues and deforestation issues than really any generation before. And as soon as they realize their money is having so much of an impact, they want to do something straight away to fix it. So I think it's completely fertile ground for folks to be talking to young people about this.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to add briefly. It's a fascinating discussion. The people on the panel, our target audiences, I would say, are bifurcated almost exclusively on our interest in being able to try and sort of, as humans, if you think about pension funds, Kenneth mentioned it, you have to be my age or older to really care, right? Because it's so far away. That time horizon is really, it's tough for 20 and 30-year-olds. But the crypto space is designed almost exclusively for that kind of an appetite, right? Like the older people want to interface with a broker and their pension fund. They want to call somebody and talk to them on the phone. And the youth are trying to do this, but they do it anonymously. So there's a full-on culture gap between generations that's happened. The most interesting point, I think, is that everybody, all those generations, are interested in trying to do well by doing right. And I think generations prior to, sort of the current 60-year-olds, didn't really have an ability to interface with all the knowledge about ESG, the environmental challenges, sustainability in general. There were sort of fringe discussions about this that came out of like 1970 Earth Day. But the reality is that we're now at a point, there's tipping points, and we're starting to see dramatic impacts from our inattention to this to climate change, and to a great extent, rainforests play a huge role, amongst the largest of the natural systems that can help us mitigate against these problems that we're going to face. And as Kenneth alludes, certainly young kids, I have 12 and 16-year-olds in my house, and they're crazy aware of what's going on in the scientific world, almost frightening. And that's the only way we're really going to move this pulse of awareness into action, is with them. But in the short term, we can't wait. So I believe that there is a generational situation, and that the youth are way more prepared to deal with this than my generation or older.
Yeah, and just to sum it all up on the crypto side, like such great comments coming from both Kenneth and Keegan about various things like pension. I'm just like, wow, that's so cool to learn about all of this today. I would just say, like, yeah, it's a younger, more diverse space, and it is a very fast-paced space. Like, everything's changing so much. The landscape, who would have thought NFTs were going to be generous? And then last year we helped over, 12 million in NFT gifts come through our platform to charities. And we saw like Trees for the Future is one of the greatest examples of NFT success out there. We actually have an NFT report you can download for free on our website and read. It's comprehensive, it's super cool. But who knew little JPEG sitting inside a token on the internet could end up becoming a way to fuel your mission and a way to work with an artist directly, support their lives, their livelihood, while also then creating a revenue stream at sale and a revenue stream in the smart contract at residual sales on the secondary markets. And now it's there and it's happening. And 5 years ago, I think people thought it was all like, what is that? And now it's actually happening and at big volumes. So I think there's a lot of young and diverse opportunity out there for organizations. I come from the symphony world in my background, where the audiences skew very white and very old, and they're not necessarily looking for the newest thing going on the planet. But that's okay. And this is an opportunity for organizations on the front lines to really think about, how do I reach those younger people and connect. And I also am really inspired by the chat going on around reporting. And I was going to say, the idea that came to my mind, and it's more of a question for the group, but how do you connect the indigenous people stories on the front lines and tell the reporting in a way that speaks to a global audience? And yes, you have Western way of coming at things with reporting around numbers and statistics and la la la, but throw that all out. How do you take the reality of what you're doing and connect in a new, more succinct way? And that's the challenge I would posit to this group today: is how can you take that and connect the dots in a way that you can tell your story, still share that impact, but maybe not spend hours and hours and hours of someone's time to get there? And I think there's probably some ways to do that.
Yeah, that's great insight, Dan. I don't know if Keegan, it looked like, did you want to answer that question?
I just wanted to say that forest carbon projects work with indigenous tribes. We are in the forest with indigenous tribes, designing project interventions that are typically related to much more traditional international development activities. It's food security, alternative livelihood activities, public health, governance, land use planning, and governance relationship to tribes, usually downriver or within the same forested space, so that they can protect their own resources from sort of the degradation that occurs in the search for economic solutions to poverty. And so the work that those carbon projects do is essentially trying to find ways to enhance standards of living in a place that's vital not just to the forest dependent communities, but to the planet itself. And the monitoring that we do usually is a combination of in-person monitoring, and remote sensing, and satellite imagery and lidar and overflights with drones. Like it's a mix of odd tech and old tech. But the reporting ends up in transparent documentation in this carbon market, which is a different, I guess, probably type of, we call it MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification. And third-party auditors come and determine that indeed we protected what we said we were going to, or we planted what we said we were going to, and that's how the credits get issued. So it's sort of built into the creation of the carbon credit itself. And it's important that the stories and the work are done by the people on the ground. That's the most important piece of the puzzle, is that we align the incentives of the flow of funds with the desires and needs of the population that live on the land.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Anne.
No, I find it super interesting because this is one of the things that I always, as with carbon credits, but especially with blockchain and smart contracts, I'm always wondering, like, how do you verify all these things? And Keegan just, like he is just talked about these things, which sound very, it sounds very good. It sounds very sophisticated. It makes sense that it's done by a third party, because that, of course, if you are supporting indigenous tribes, they're never gonna have the knowledge or the access to send drones and make analysis of those imagery and then send that back to the donor. So indeed, it kind of, I imagine it needs a collaboration of both sides. I always thought, and that is probably a very a misunderstanding from my side, that Dan might confirm, that I always thought that blockchain, these type of blockchain contracts are really best fit for reforestation projects, because it's the easiest to verify with satellite imagery or something like that. But as soon as you talk about different type of conservation initiatives, it becomes much harder to verify, because you need to send people on the ground to there. Yeah, Dan can react to that maybe.
Yeah, and that's so cool. I think you could. I mean, the cool thing with smart contracts is we've seen a house sale in Florida happen on the Ethereum blockchain. And I'm like, wow, like, has anyone ever purchased a house in any country? I mean, like, the paperwork is hundreds and hundreds of pages of paperwork just to purchase a house. And one of the fundamental things that I love about the crypto space, and what inspired me to leave the orchestra world and enter the crypto space, was NFTs, because it's just so such an interesting space whereby you don't have to produce an ID to transact money. Like, literally, you can get a DeFi wallet and send that money direct to whomever you want, using crypto. And so, like with smart contracts, you can create different things to trigger and happen on the blockchain. And then, like Anne's saying, you can go and find that smart contract by the wallet ID or the contract address. I've done it on my spare time, and you look it up, and it's like, wow, everything's there. It's a little bit fun to read because it's usually in developer language, so you got to speak a little code to kind of find your way around. But it's all there for the world to see, and you can't hide it. Everyone can look it up. Everyone can see it as long as they have an internet, connection on a device. I understand that that could be a little bit of a barrier in and of itself, having access to an internet device, but it's the thinking and the possibilities are endless on the smart contracts and the blockchain. And just, I'm really inspired by the ideas of how this could change reforestation, how this could really fuel and fund the frontline efforts. I think that would be so cool to see, some transformation there as well.
Yeah, I think, Dan, there was a question specifically for you. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chat around what is the effect of blockchain operations on the environment. I think you touched on that a little bit there. Are there any elements of the actual operations of blockchain that are particularly positive or negative for the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we can't get around the fact that there was a lot of energy consumption, launching Bitcoin, launching Ethereum, some of the blockchains. But I think what's important is that there's a lot of bad narratives out there where people are just like touting on that. It's sort of like the age old, like somebody gets an idea and then shares it, and then the bad information spreads faster. But what's interesting is when you look at like the diamond industry or the gold industry, like the land impact of just simply, tearing up the land so that someone can wear that gold on their finger, or so that we can pass that gold bar back and forth, is far more significant than crypto will ever be. Is very interesting. There's a lot of sources and links you can Google and look up. But what's super cool is, like, we partner with Gemini Wallet. That's one of our main partners, and they have a green initiative. I can't say a lot today, but there's something that we're going to be doing in July that's going to be so cool that all of you are going to want to be aware of. So keep a watch on our space. Middle of July, maybe end of July, we'll announce it. But we've got something in the works on our end too, to be more than just supportive of, the future of the blockchain in a way that's, carbon neutral or better for the environment, but to be like a positive actor in the space. So more to come there. But also, I was just going to say, like, the as the systems change around, like, the way we're thinking about this, the way we're investing in this is so key. And I think it's so important that this message about, being responsible with the environment is heard in the crypto space, and that all of you are getting involved and saying that, so that when people are setting things up, thinking about how the systems and the blockchains work, that they are thinking about the impact in the environment. And we're seeing that from DeFi platforms that are completely carbon neutral to investments in carbon offsets with companies like South Pole. Things are happening that, I think are going to transform this space for the good.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Dan. We're getting near the end of our time slot here. I know that we actually do have some flexibility because there's not an event following us on the main stage. So for anyone who wants to stay on, we're going to keep chatting for a few more minutes. And if there are any questions from the audience, now's a great time to ask them. In the meantime, there's another question I saw earlier that was specifically addressing the challenge of organizations, and I'll call it out specifically because I saw it in the chat, but I know there are many organizations that do something similar, but Charity Navigator is one example where a significant amount of revenue is required to even get your name on the site. It's how historically a lot of organizations have vetted nonprofits, and it inherently limits the success to the ones that have enough revenue to even make it on the site. So I'm curious, is that something that any of your solutions are aware of or addressing? And specifically, I know that you guys are like basically an alternative to that in a sense, but I'm just curious what your reactions to that challenge would be, because I know a lot of smaller nonprofits that have really high impact models have struggled with that.
Want specifically, shall I react to it first, or is the question especially directed to the others?
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, yeah, I think leveling the playing field is just really important here, and I really believe in the power of the smaller men. I think that was clear from indeed what we're saying, and I think that would, that is one thing that Conservation Connect is really built for, to level that playing field. It's just one of the main critical things that I think really should be happening. I'm also curious how the other initiatives actually deal with this, and if there's, because it's so, I can totally relate with the challenge of, if you have money available, you're looking for initiatives, how would you address the smaller organizations, because indeed they have sometimes not the same resources, they don't have the same education, they don't have the same so there is, it is also a risk to take in a way. So I'm wondering how the other initiatives are actually dealing with this risk.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that. I was just thinking, Anne, one side thing I wanted to mention in a way that we're helping fund the front line for smaller organizations and larger organizations is we have these impact index funds, and they're different in that they're like crowdfunding, but different in that they fund the crypto organizations on our platform who are working in that space. So we have an environmental impact index funds, which supports Rainforest Partnership as well as Trees for the Future and many other organizations. And so what a donor does is, I want to part with my crypto today. I need my tax incentive receipt right away. I want to help a bunch of organizations with one gift. They give to this impact index fund, and then it goes to our DAF provider, who then splits it up equally to all the organizations in that pool in that given month or whatever the time period is for that fund. And then we send out a check to everybody on the front line. So you don't do anything. We're getting the word out about the fund. You might help and share once in a while as an organization in the fund, but it's a great way. And we've seen some great philanthropy come through because somebody needed to immediately move some money and help a bunch of folks, and it's really neat. Or they're inspired because they can make one gift that helps all these different environmental organizations, and that matters. And it's a super cool initiative. It's a great way to sort of just get a little bit of like sort of passive income for the organization, because you don't really have to do anything to receive it, other than just be with us and take some crypto and fundraise crypto. But then I was also thinking, in terms of the connectivity thing, I think it's okay to have a little bit of time and money spent in the organization on figuring out how to raise money and to transform. I think that was one of the things that always impressed upon me in my fundraising career, especially at larger organizations. You're constantly sort of getting that question about overhead and expenses, and it's a legitimate question. But I would come back at it with like, well, let's just be transparent with what we're spending on and how we're spending money. Yes, it costs money to raise money sometimes, but beyond all that narrative, like, how can you tell the story? How can you take some time to tell your story impactfully? Put together the various elements that you think will really connect with people, and then try out some of it. But as a small organization, there's no harm in being transparent. Throw up your financials on the internet. Take 5 minutes and do it. Just say, we spent 100,000 this year, and this is what we did with it. I don't think you need to spend hours and hours of someone's time to do something very simple, but I think that's the value of what the blockchain, to Anne's point, can be for you, is that you don't have to be on the blockchain to do this, but just that transparency and that ability to just see what's going on for people, make it easy to connect the dots. Just, have a high level, easy detail about what you did with your, here's the 5 things we did this year with the money you sent us. Take the hour it takes to put that on the internet or on your social media blog or whatever you're doing to get the word out there. And I think you can point people to that as a way to sort of connect with you. But there's many, many ways you can come at this. That's just one idea in the conversation.
It's also, I just wanted to say that it's really interesting to hear the discussion about the level of complexity and depth which the monitoring, reporting, and verification needs for a donor-driven blockchain dynamic or a corporate investment of millions of dollars in carbon credits, or an investment pension fund, right? Like, the level of due diligence is totally different. So what Dan just described is something that would not work in a carbon asset development setting or in an investment from a pension fund at all, right? Those are totally different processes, but both need to be used to leverage and channel finance from sort of high, low, in the middle, so that we can all use, as I describe it as, all tools all the time. Right now is our moment. We need to be climate warriors, and we need to work on rainforest conservation and protection and establishment of new rainforests. And every tool we can use to leverage is important, but we should also recognize that not all tools are built the same, right? Some tools are built to move, huge juggernauts like Kenneth's discussions with pension funds. Those are battleships to steer in the ocean. That's a different lift than take an hour and put it on your website, right? So just thought I'd mention that. But they're both super important, and they both lead to cultural changes that will be long lasting and vital for this campaign as we move through time.
Yes, and I just wanted to comment on Dan's what Dan said about, like, I don't say there's anything wrong with having overhead. By the way, I like have big organizations do great work as well. I'm an advocate of also giving the smaller organizations, or the indigenous communities, or those other ones that often fall off the radar, to also give them that chance for that. And I think that is also something you are actually doing, because blockchain is accessible for everyone that is connected to the internet. And then I was wondering, because for you it's very clear, just take an hour and put this and that on the internet. But I can imagine organizations looking for funding, they're just lost in the forest, literally, of all these solutions out there. So how to choose the best, what are you going to focus your efforts on? Because as an organization wanting that money, you don't want to be behind your computer. Even if it takes an hour, your mission is to be in the field. So you want to spend as little time as possible behind your computer. So as an organization, just putting myself in their shoes, how would they choose between their strategy, and how would they choose what platform they will focus their energy and time on. And maybe a question to Dan is, when is blockchain the best solution?
Wow, that is huge. Like I don't feel even able to answer that. That's amazing, and I think there's always going to have to be careful choices in an organization's spend on like time. You know, having been in the organizational side, I mean, obviously arts is a little different than working on the front lines in a small organization in reforestation or protecting an important habitat or whatever. But I'd say what I learned that I think could be interesting to share with this group is that um, you you're going to have to take some time. I think that's the message, is like you're going to have to figure out how to spend your time, but start somewhere. You don't have to start with the biggest solution or that, but try something. Be willing to. I always tell folks, be willing to fail forward, and that you might try something and it works a little bit or it doesn't work at all, and then just be willing to pick up the pieces and pivot. I think this is where the startup culture of a small organization can be really helpful for you. Is that you're going to have to wear a lot of hats. You're going to have to try a lot of things. I used to manage a little $200,000 organization by myself, the only paid staff member. I was the plan giving officer. I was the marketer. I sold. You couldn't buy a ticket to a concert without talking to me. You couldn't give a gift without talking to me. And so it was like a really crazy job because I didn't know what to focus on every day. And I think that's where I can, to Anne's point, can really feel what you might be going through on the front line, because I was literally the only paid staff member that existed. And I remember being like, I can't do it all. I would work weekends and nights and try to do everything I could to get it done. And I think you're going to have to decide like, okay, what can I do? What can I try? But look at some options that are out there when you have the time. Stay focused on your mission. That's the prime directive. To Anne's point, I totally agree. Like, getting that mission done is always going to come first. And then think about like little ways you can just try to tell your story, make an impact, but not spend it, don't spend a full-time job telling your story. Just look at key measurables, that are important to you and the people receiving your services, and tell that, and focus there, double down on that message. But that's a couple tips I had. And I think blockchain could be interesting if you have a developer, and you can put a smart contract with your annual report, or you can do all kinds of stuff out there that could be really interesting. But yeah, start somewhere, start small, give it a try, be willing to pivot, but don't spend all your time doing that. Spend most of your time doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is your mission. I'm very curious to hear Kenneth and Keegan's thoughts too.
Yeah, it's a slightly kind of different one for our organisation, because we don't kind of often work directly with those kind of organisations, the pension funds kind of funds. So we work on the pension fund side and the kind of like public side to push those pension funds. But I kind of agree with others. I think spending time, taking time out. I spotted somebody made a kind of comment about having a comms team. I think that's kind of really kind of effective one. But I'd also say working with local government, working with institutions that disperse the funds, and working in partnership with those who are already receiving significant amount of funds from others is another kind of way to do this. But yeah, definitely not. I would say I'm not the expert, but yeah, I think the things that people have said are very valid.
And then again, my relationship to this discussion is a little different, because I have corporate client buyers who want to buy an asset that's an environmental service, and then I have people who manage or depend upon resources on planet Earth, and we sort of create this link between. So it's a slightly different model, but just start somewhere and fall forward. I love those. So I think that, Laura on the chat is talking about, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think with respect to all of these relatively complicated processes, do some due diligence on who is credible, who is worthy of your time, attention, and resources, and then make a start. Try to find a relationship, make a linkage of some sort. Reach out, send an email, see whether or not there is a project to be made, or whether there is value from your relationship to that sort of rainforest protection or forest protection in general. Um, we don't all have to solve all of these problems. That's why there's this plethora of people engaged in all of this work globally, but we amongst ourselves maybe don't communicate enough to prioritize sort of who people should go talk to. So I'm super excited that World Rainforest Day is helping us do that, right? That's one of the greatest values here, is is connecting the dots between all of our weird crypto, biodiversity, pension fund, carbon market worlds, which are siloed. We don't talk to each other enough. We don't understand each other enough. And if we did, those synergies maybe could push us over the line. So,
Yeah.
and I apologize, I do have to go.
Thank you for being here, Keegan.
And it has been a pleasure. Thank you all so much. Keep going,
Thank you.
climate warriors, right? That's our plan.
Thank you,
Cheers,
Keegan.
everybody.
Thank you.
So with that, I want to give everyone, just with our last couple of minutes here, an opportunity to share any final thoughts, any pieces of advice for donors, for people seeking funding, any last thoughts you want to share on this topic before we sign off and encourage people to connect with you outside of this space. We can start with Kenneth. You're off mute. I'll hand it to Kenneth.
Yeah, I mean, basically to say, I think this has been a really kind of interesting discussion, and I am actually enjoying the chat, and I'm glad it will be available afterwards so I can kind of parse through it. But I think that there's so much money and so many opportunities, and from what people have said, there's actually often a lot more money than there are projects, which I think is a kind of really interesting one. I think that's a really good space to kind of like see, and more money will get going towards that as well. And I think that everyone as individuals can help with the kind of regulatory kind of like campaign sides. So to help kind of increase that flow of money by speaking to kind of regulators, speaking to your kind of MP, your representative, your senator, variations of kind of political systems around the world, and just making sure that they're creating that regulatory space for investors and pension funds to be able to go deforestation free. So right now, many funds are thinking about investing some money in deforestation things or offsets, but until governments actually save the planet, to save the world, the lungs of our kind of planet, we actually do need to go deforestation free. We need to go deforestation free quickly. We'll still see kind of it almost being seen as a niche element within the kind of global financial system, as opposed to actually a core unnecessary part. So I think that would be my final reflection. And have we look on our website, and there's tools you can contact your pension fund with, and we have partners around the world as well. So definitely feel free to contact me off the stream, and I'm happy to help.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kenneth. Dan and Anne, I said I wouldn't say your names together, but there it is. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll jump in then. I'll just say it's been a pleasure to be a part of this conversation today. Very fascinating, from granting to offsets to, just investing in pension funds and in a way that helps our planet. I think this has just been such an honor to be here. I just want to say my simple message is this: do something. Like, just get inspired by your mission, make some action, make some connections if you can, and don't be afraid to ask others to help. Like, if you're a small organization, you don't have a lot of funds, maybe reach into your network and see who can spend an hour helping you with communications, who can spend an hour helping you recruit more people to help, or to help you with fundraising, or to help you with various things that will help you be successful. Build a team around you, if you can, because that's going to be so important. And take care of yourself. Like, that's the other message I think I missed along my journey that I wish somebody would have said to me 10 years ago. Like, you're a rare asset in and of yourself, and you care about the forest, you care about the rainforest like future, and the importance it has on both the climate as well as the biodiversity and everything in between. And I think if you're not, spending the time it takes to make sure you're 100% your best self, that's going to also show in your work as well. So don't forget that in all of the things you're doing, because you'll make action, you'll raise money, you'll be successful as long as you stay at it. But you're not going to stay at it if you don't take care of the person running everything, which is you.
That's great advice, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, love those advices. Thank you so much. I also really, I'm really grateful to be on this panel. It was really interesting. So many mind-blowing ideas and initiatives. Really, really cool. As Keegan already said, like, we maybe don't speak enough because we're all operating in our own silos. We have our own, let's say, tunnel vision for our own solution, but there are so many solutions that I think is great that there are so many solutions. We can, like, we need everything right now, right? So it is not a bad thing that multiple solutions exist next to each other, and that with these, like, we work towards a common goal. With my question to Dan before, what I was really also meant to make that bridge indeed to the organizations that were listening maybe to this panel and thinking, well, if there's all this money, then how do I access it? Where do I start? And I love the advice that the advices that came up about failing forward, starting somewhere. It is definitely the case, and yeah, I think we're all in our niche doing what we can on our side as well to help. So yeah, excited, and thank you so much, Sarah, as well, for moderating, and everyone for listening. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And I just, to close, I love what you just said, Anne, which is that we all come from these different spaces and we all share a common goal. And I think that's really what World Rainforest Day is entirely about. And I'm really glad that this panel was able to represent that that purpose. So again, thank you all so much. And thank you to our very engaged crowd. I do apologize that we weren't able to hit all of the questions. We just had a conversation flowing. I encourage you all to connect with our fantastic panelists and with Keegan, who is no longer on, but I'm sure would love to connect with you all as well. I know Hopin has some networking features, and I believe everybody has their LinkedIn attached to their Hopin profile. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of World Rainforest Day.